Hi, everybody. Welcome in to the Irish NFL show. My name is Michael McQuaid, joined Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary. Can you boys all hear me? Yeah.
All good so far,
Everybody can
Michael.
hear me okay, yeah?
So far, so good.
Yes.
Tempted to mess with your head and say no, but yes, we can hear you.
During the intro, the sprinklers just went off and I am completely soaked. So this is really worth it so far. Welcome in. Colin, start off with you. Good NFL weekend so far?
Yeah, a fascinating NFL weekend. I think there's a whole host of stuff to talk about. Some big results. Some surprises. Plenty of things we take for granted at this point. Tom Brady doing Tom Brady things. But lots and lots to discuss. Brian, what caught your eye yesterday?
I would go with the Raiders. They caught my eye. Again, 2 weeks in a row, they've had reasonably comfortable games, and the scores don't really reflect how strong they were. Derek Carr had a 91.1% completion rate. 5 drives in a row with scores against an Eagles defense that, for some reason, despite being scored upon, their defensive quarter refused to change the scheme at any stage during the game. So, yeah, I touched on it last week when we were in London, that I felt if they won against Denver, I was confident they'd beat the Eagles, and I know the Chargers didn't play. So right now, they're the top of the division, and I don't think many people would have thought that. And look, we'll get to the chaos that is the Chiefs fairly shortly. But I would say it was nice to actually be at home watching the NFL this weekend, having been to London for the past 2 weekends. And the hectic schedule that we had throughout the 2 weeks, it was nice to actually sit back, enjoy a Giants win, and enjoy Red Zone.
Mark, what about you? What were some of your highlights?
Yeah, so actually defenses were one of the things that was fascinating me this week, Colin. You know, a couple of defenses that have been a bit maligned stepped up. Green Bay finally got some red zone defense sorted out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose defense has been criticized, obviously made the rather light work of the Chicago Bears. But it's funny, you kicked off by saying, you know, what we take for granted, and you know, Tom Brady throwing 600. I'm sure we'll come to that. Matt Stafford throwing for his 300th, and the really fascinating game between the Rams and Lions. But something we only had 7 games of, but I hope we never take for granted. And yes, Bengals fans will talk plenty about it, but is already the connection between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. 754 yards receiving already, more than any receiver ever through their first 7 games of their NFL career. And going off for 200 yesterday. I mean, some of the stuff is just fascinating. So plenty to talk about, including the fact, gentlemen, because this might come up once or 20 times during this show, that week 7 of the NFL also featured on the same weekend that Liverpool beat Man United 5-0 in the Premier League. And as I share this show with 3 avid Man United fans, I can only imagine there might be an allusion or two to that game as well. So just putting it out there, boys.
I'm not sure
from the whole start of that show.
Anyway, yeah. Mark's end of the show.
I think we may as well move right on to the performance of yesterday, which was the brilliant Bengals. Brian, what did you make of look, let's call it what it was. It was a beatdown in Baltimore.
It was a beatdown in Baltimore, but it was 13-10 at halftime, and I don't think anybody out there would have thought that the Bengals would have won convincingly as they did. Look, they were well in the game, and like even going into the second half, I felt they have a real opportunity, and we touched on it on the show at the weekend. I think the fact that Mark and Michael picked the Bengals shows how far they've come. And Chase, like Mark said, there's this combination that Burrow and Chase over 200 yards. What struck me, and it's more from a Ravens point of view, is having said on the show yesterday morning that I felt that they would double coverage Chase, because that's what they did last weekend on the Chargers, and it worked so effectively that they would come in with a similar enough game plan for this game, and they didn't. They put Humphries solely on Chase throughout the whole game, never looked to correct it when they saw how productive Chase was being in the game, and then he goes off that touchdown, and it was a great play, but at the same time, the tackling I thought was pretty poor by the Ravens guys. But again, touching back on the Bengals, we touched on it a couple of weeks ago, how productive they've been on defense, that they had more sacks at this stage of the season that they had throughout the entirety of last season. And yesterday, 5 sacks. They took away the run pass option from Jackson, and from Lamar. And if you do that, it kind of becomes very one-dimensional. And as the game went on, you saw they were very ineffective on offense. It's a big win, and I can understand why all these Bengal fans are very chirpy today. I thought they won the division this morning, but not to be. It is in there for a few weeks to go before that's all confirmed.
Mark, what was your take on the Bengals yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, Colin, there were a couple of negatives, and I'm going to start with them because there's so many positives to talk about. But the run game was pretty contained for most of the game. Obviously, Mixon and Micken, I think it is, broke off longer runs at the end of the game. Obviously, when it was stop it or bust from the Ravens, but they were somewhat contained. And when you look at the offensive targets, it is the Jamar Chase show, and Boyd and Higgins underneath a little bit, but there's very few targets there in terms of other options for Burrow in the same way. But the positives are so strong. I mentioned at the start about defenses. This season, I'm looking around, and I don't see that many good defenses, like actual good defenses. If you think about it, we thought the Bears were going to be a substantial defense. They're not. We thought the Broncos were going to be there. We thought the Giants were going to be there. They're really not. And most of the contenders have powerful offenses and pretty flawed defenses. The Bengals defense, though, is for real. To bottle up Lamar Jackson like they did, they got 5 sacks against him, for Christ's sake. And the man is like lightning in a bottle. So that is not an easy thing to do. And the one thing I'll say about this Bengals team that really struck me halfway through, it's like they're now scary. Like Bengals under, let's only go back a couple of years, or under the Andy Dalton years, they've never scared you. You'd think to yourself, okay, they'll make the playoffs and stuff like that, but they won't do anything. This team started, I think it was punt, field goal, punt, but you never felt like they were out of it. The defense kept them close. The offense always looks like it could explode. Now they're actually scary. Now they're actually for real, and that is a sea change from the Bengals that we've known in the past. This was a huge game. I think we kind of called it beforehand. Like, this is the biggest regular season game they've had in about 5 years, and fundamentally puts them in pole position now in that division. They've got to keep the momentum going, but enjoy it now. Like, enjoy the moments, because Bengals fans should be cock-a-hoop today. 5-2, got that key divisional win, and they won it deservedly going away. What about yourself, Colin? Because, I mean, I know you were watching this one avidly on Sky the other day.
What I thought was brilliant for the Bengals was the way in which, and you called it out there, Mark, the response to the Ravens, right? I was fascinated to see how the Ravens were going to approach this, because they're usually so blitz heavy. And early on, they got pressure on Burrow. But Burrow responded accordingly. And as Brian said, the Ravens didn't change personnel. But Humphrey's supposed to be CB1. He's supposed to be one of the top guys in the league. So you expect that he's going to be able to contain Jamar Chase. But, I mean, Chase is having himself a season. If Chase keeps going the way he is, he's going to absolutely smash Justin Jefferson's record that he set last year. And talk about scary. Joe Burrow had those 2 lads to throw to in college. Imagine what that was like for opposing defenses at that point. The Bengals, since 1990, they've started 5-2 6 times. They've all this is their 6th. They've gone to the playoffs the last 5 times. So you imagine that they will be playoff bound again. But it definitely, if you are the Steelers watching this, or the rest of the division, you're now sitting up and taking notice. As you said, under Andy Dalton, they were solid at times, but they weren't scary. Now they are capable of really striking fear, I think, into the heart of everyone, because Burrow is a supremely talented QB and very, very tough. And look, the Bengals fans, long suffering, absolutely deserve this one. I can understand the celebrations today. I suppose the the next talking point after the Bengals, obviously, look, that was the biggest talking point of the season, but biggest talking point of the evening, the biggest talking point of the season might be the Kansas City Chiefs, who now have the same record as the Denver Broncos. What did you make of the Chiefs yesterday, Brian?
I thought Patrick Mahomes is the guy that's supposed to be striking the daggers into the hearts of many a team, and not this Bengals team. 4 sacks yesterday for Mahomes, 4 interceptions. The wheels have completely come off. Andy Reid came out with a very interesting quote after the game. Was, "I'm seeing things now I've never experienced with this team," and to me that sounds like they're not all buying into where Andy's preaching, or maybe I'm not saying it's coming to the end of the line, far from it, but something has gone amiss because this defense has completely unraveled, and the offensive lines to a certain extent has completely unraveled as well, because Orlando Brown does not look like the player in which they traded for from the Ravens. The only player who's really effective and having good performances is Tooney, but you can't do it on his own. They have a rookie playing at right tackle. The right guard is they have a rookie at right guard. The right tackle is ineffective, and Mahomes is struggling. He's struggling because he's not getting any time, and the players down the field aren't delivering. It was interesting yesterday to see the Titans put 2 safeties, in the middle of the field. So let's take Kelsey out of the game, make him ineffective, and let's see can they do it with Hill. And Hill hasn't been playing as well as previous seasons, so they really are struggling. And for a Titans team that defensively has, let's be fair, they've won some big games this year in Seattle and again against Buffalo Monday night. They've struggled defensively, so to hold Mahomes to 3 points, or the Chiefs' offense to 3 points, it's a significant win for them going forward, because they've got a big one this weekend with the Colts. Haven't seen the Colts win last night, and then this is a career record for all the wrong reasons. The Chiefs under Mahomes have never scored these type of points. He's never had this yardage in terms of what he threw for yesterday. It's the lowest of all lows, and it's interesting to see how they get on next week. He also went off injured, but looks like he's going to be fine for next week's game.
Mark, what was your take on the Chiefs, and where do they go from here?
That's the key question, Colin. 17 turnovers they've had through 7 games. We're saying it's not like an Andy Reid show. It's not like what Patrick Mahomes has shown today. But the reality is now it's not a 1-game overreaction. It's not a 2-game overreaction. I mean, we're talking about through 7 games, we've seen very clearly who they are. And Brian makes it a really good point there. I backed the Chiefs to win this game because I felt that the Titans secondary was there to be exploited. And fundamentally, either Mahomes isn't getting time in the pocket or Hill isn't getting open, particularly because usually you run through 2 deep safeties and you kind of open the underneath quite clearly. But they're just not doing it. They're not functioning the way they used to. And against the Titans, I really thought it was just going to be a matter of carving them up, because they have been carved up. Josh Allen, we only saw carve them up recently. Think about 2 games ago, and let's turn our attention to the Titans. 2 games ago, they lost to the Jets, and it looked like, what are they doing? Okay, they're still not going to lose the AFC South, but what are they doing as a team? And now look, back-to-back wins against the Bills and the Chiefs. Last season, obviously, the cream of the AFC. So they deserve all credit for bouncing back in that way. Derrick Henry breaking out the jump pass, Ryan Tannehill staying super efficient, taking care of the ball. They're not doing anything stupid, and they do still have downfield a degree of an X factor, obviously, between the wide receiver combo they've got there, play there. So credit to the Titans. The Chiefs are in a tailspin. There's no 2 ways about it. Do I feel still that they've got time to get it right? Well, yes, I do, because even if you feel like the division starts to get out of reach and maybe the Chargers or the Raiders continue the momentum and pull away, the AFC wildcard spots are actually very combined at the moment. So there's still plenty of opportunity there. But if they don't turn it around soon, when does it go a little bit into the panic stations? And that's where I'd say it. Now, I know we'll talk about other games in a second, but Colin, I mean, like, they're your division. You've hated them for the last 5 years when they've won back-to-back division titles. Is it a little bit of joy and enjoyment about this, or are you kind of just thinking it's the calm before the storm?
Yeah, there's a bit of schadenfreude there, of course. I mean, the Chiefs, who I thought would, be able to overcome yesterday. I expected a high-scoring game, but I thought the Chiefs would score points, and the fact that they didn't, is very telling, because not only yesterday did we see the issues on defense, but we saw issues on offense. Look, they still have some wonderful players, and you never know, I suppose, how teams are going to respond when they hit is this rock bottom? Do they now go away? Do they circle the wagons? Do they look to get back on track? But you would have to say that there were all sorts of concerns. And just one point on, like, Derrick Henry was held to 86 yards yesterday, though there was a really lovely piece with him in Peter King's Football Morning in America, really understated. He's on course to kind of, depending on health, kind of, I suppose, look at Jim Brown's kind of records. And the fact that he talked, so highly of Jim Brown, and can't believe that he's in that sort of company. But yesterday, as I said, Mark, like he that jump pass was a thing of beauty. And just to see Derrick Henry break that out, and there are other trick plays that we're going to come and talk to. But you would have to say, in a 7-day stretch, having lost to the Jets, to go and do a number on both the Bills and the Chiefs is serious business. Brian?
I was just going to say the narrative of the NFL is so tricky, because on Friday morning, after the Broncos have lost to the Browns, there's a lot of doom and gloom around Denver fans in terms of the season's going to get away from us very quickly here. And yet the Chiefs are in the same position in terms of the record. And if the Giants were somehow to pull off, which I think it's a very big ask, to go in and beat the Chiefs next Monday night, the Giants will be 3-5 and the Chiefs will be 3-5. So it's just how one team's, I suppose, looked at and compared to other teams, because everybody just assumes at some stage the Chiefs are going to get it right. But are they going to get it right? Because this defense just keeps proving time and time again this season that they're just not up to it. They made changes last week, which I wouldn't say it worked that much, because Washington were quite poor in that second half. They've made change. They've addressed it to a certain extent. They've removed players out, brought players in, and it's not working. And it mightn't work next week, and it mightn't work the week after. And I know Mark's pointed around the wild cards, because of the extra wild card place. It could be 9 wins, might be enough to get you a wild card. But at what stage will it start working? Because you can run out of games very quickly in the NFL before you know it. You're struggling to even make a wild card spot.
Yeah. Hey, if you're a Patriots fan, you're praying that 9 wins will get you a wild card, is all I can say. But that being said, I mean, Colin, you kind of alluded to it there. There was a trick play, the Derrick Henry jump pass in the Titans game, which was obviously entertaining to see. Bit of a Tebow jump pass come back to the fruition. But there was another game where there was more than 1 or 2 trick plays. I mean, the Lions versus the Rams. Did you see that first quarter coming? Is all I'll say. Sean McVay certainly didn't see it coming.
As a Broncos fan, what the Lions did in the opening 15 minutes yesterday was more exciting than anything that the Broncos have done in the past 5 years. And kudos to Dan Campbell and the Lions for putting it up to the Rams. They had to go for it. They did go for it. Ultimately, it's all for naught. But you would have to say that clearly the team is still playing for him. Clearly he's trying to win. This is not a team that has down tools. And they just ran up against, I guess, a team in the Rams who, are a really good team. Now, Penei Sewell standing up to Aaron Donald, I thought was great to see. If you're a Lions fan, that's kind of what you want to see, is your players not backing down. But Donald still gets the pressure, still causes all sorts of issues, and Cooper Kupp is still Cooper Kupp. So the Rams also made an interesting move in trading one of their starting linebackers to the Broncos today. Interested to see, because when you trade a starter, is there something bigger in the works there? It might be something to keep an eye on. Brian, what did you make of the Rams-Lions yesterday?
I think Donald's frustration is by the fact that he didn't really have a very good game. Was the one defensively. If you look at the stats today, he didn't have 1 pressure on the quarterback. And I don't think he's playing that well this season. Penei Sewell did a reasonably good job on him. You go on, Mark, have a go at it, check the stats. Not 1 pressure on the quarterback yesterday. Came from other players, not him. But I thought the Lions were going to have to do something eccentric to win the game. Would that be fair? They were never going to win the game just going up and down the field. We're alluding to the first drive. Yeah, the very fast drive, scored a touchdown, onside kick. Didn't do much with that particular drive. Then they were punting, fake punt. But to fake punt once and do it, and then to do it again in the game. Like McVay must be like, how is McVay not realizing the way they were playing? They were always going to be going for these particular scenarios, and to be done twice. He didn't look a very happy man yesterday, despite the victory. The Lions, what failed the Lions yesterday was they were in the red zone 5 times. They didn't score 1 touchdown after. So they were effective. They got into the red zone in the right positions. They just couldn't put it away. And people are blaming Goff today for the interception. Yeah, fine. It was a good interception by Ramsey, but the reality was he had a reasonably good game. But when it came to the crunch in the red zone, they couldn't punch it in. And ultimately, that's what cost them the game because they only lost by 9 points.
But Brian, the reason I was looking at you funny is that interception was the one where Donald actually forced pressure up the inside. He got inside pressure on. Maybe they didn't record it in the stat sheet, but he's the one who forced Goff
I was coming through the stat sheet today, wasn't I?
Well, I mean, yeah, he was the one that forced Goff to release it early, and it was a bit of a wing duck and everything.
Yeah,
it was kind of like one of those plays. Well, Donald will step up and Ramsey steps up when you needed to. I mean, bear in mind, it was 25-19 at that point.
Yeah.
A touchdown would have put them in the lead. The problem there, though, is I agree, Goff had a good game other than that. But that's the problem with Goff, is that when it matters, do you really trust him? And the most pointed thing, and you can say this is a bit harsh, right? But Jared Goff is 0-14 when Sean McVay isn't his head coach. And in the post-game interview, McVay wouldn't be drawn on any comments about Goff. Like, he was kind of very cagey. He was just like, he had a good game. I'm not really going to talk about him. But then he's asked about Stafford, and he said, he was great in the clutch. He's our leader. And a couple of other superlatives. And you can't help but feel a couple of those are a little bit of barbed comments back against, Jared Goff in some respects. It's like Mo Salah saying after a game and everything, like, United Defense played well. They only let me score 3 goals. It was okay. These type of things, they add up.
He made the comments. He made the comments during the press conference leading up to the game. He said, it's great to have a quarterback who listens to the play and we shouldn't call it.
He did. But I mean, he doubled down on it after the game as well. He's not letting up in that regard. Look, Cooper Kupp had a great game as well, 10 for 156. Always deserves a call out. It's almost, otherworldly, the mental connection between him and Stafford at times. It feels like that they can read the play and they're there for each other. But that was a lot tougher than the Rams would have expected. And in fairness to the Lions, you can see what they did with Don Mulback, the long snapper, in honoring him. Obviously, when they didn't make 53, he actually joined back at the team as a special assistant. We talked, I think, on Thursday night, or on the Sunday show, about Chris Spielman and the kind of Pride of the Lions war for him, where they got him reading it out and kind of released it on social. And Campbell, much as I kind of joked about like the dude at the first instance, he is a former player. And he absolutely got them playing hard. And if there's any solace to take out of this, Lions fans, where you're 0-7 and it's not looking like a good season, there are these little baby steps where it feels like the franchise is trying to take the right direction. There's a group of men there that are fighting hard and actually delivering and still showing up week in, week out. Can they keep it going all the way through? Yeah, I don't know. But unlike some teams, the Jets, they certainly haven't seemed to have given up on the season.
Just make a quick point. You're saying baby steps, Mark. Well, a lot of people seem to think they're going to make the final step and win next week because the Lions came out. The Lions, pardon the pun. The betting Lions came out for next weekend's games, and the Lions are getting 3 points against the Eagles. And one very interesting note I saw this evening: 90% of the bets that are gone on the NFL next weekend are all on the Lions to beat the Eagles. People are obviously confident after watching the performance yesterday.
Well, I mean, they've got something to be said there, and Lions kill Eagles like, I don't know, birds kill United teams and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm going to find some more relevance to this. I mean, some games are actually over by half time and everything, a bit like Liverpool, Man United. But one game that wasn't over by half time was the Falcons versus the Dolphins, the 2 London teams up against each other and slugging it out. Colm, how did you find our good friends from both London games, being we know the team so well at this stage, and how that game went down?
I thought it encapsulated both teams kind of perfectly because you saw the good and bad in each of them. We saw good Tua in ways, but we saw bad Tua with the 2 interceptions. And I've seen a lot of comments today that Tua is not the problem in Miami. Is he the solution, though? There are a number of problems, I think. I think the other thing that struck me was Kyle Pitts, 163 receiving yards, second most in a single game by a rookie tight end since the merger in 1970. He's growing to be just a phenomenal player, and I think Matty Ryan realized as the game went on just what a mismatch he is. And the Dolphins tried all sorts of things to try to stop him, but he kept coming up time and time again. The Dolphins just cannot find ways to win at the moment. The Falcons are absolutely a work in progress. This is a team that will undoubtedly lose a significant number of games, I think, unfortunately, over the rest of the season. But they'll always be in with a puncher's chance when you have Matt Ryan, who is playing really well, and Kyle Pitts. But I do have huge concerns about their defense.
I think what we saw yesterday just kind of sums up to it in many ways. He scored, he throws for 4 touchdowns, but yet he throws for 2 interceptions. And the interceptions in particular, one in the red zone and one just after they've had their own interception by their defense, who don't seem to pick up many interceptions in terms of how they're playing this season. And the momentum seems to be swinging a little bit towards Michael's in and now. The momentum seemed to be swinging towards the Dolphins at that stage, and then obviously he throws the interception. They were key points in the game. I mean, in the red zone, to take another score off the score there, who knows how it ends up. So it just shows the inconsistency of the man. And they left too much time on the clock. It's kind of the reality of the Dolphins' defense these days. They can't be trusted. And the Falcons drove down and got a well-deserved win. The Falcons are definitely going in the right direction. And Mark's question last week around how long Brian Flores is going to be around is starting to kind of the heat is growing on them there. Interesting enough, I saw one since evening, Colin, I don't know if you saw it yet. 2 has been suggested to the Broncos, that the Broncos really are considering making a move, more so because they believe this Watson trade will happen either Wednesday this week or Monday of next week. The reason why they're cutting it off Thursday, Friday is because both teams will be focusing on the game and the trade won't go down. But there's talk that Tua potentially could be going to Denver. I don't know if you picked up on that report this evening, but a few people are picking up on it, including Michael Lombardi.
Well, maybe the mile-high air might help throw it a little bit further, but that wouldn't fill me with confidence, I would have to say.
Just about to ask you that question, I think you've already answered it.
I think Colum's face said it all, Brian, to be honest with you. I mean, you hit on the problem. He did the exact same thing as he did in London. The defense creates a takeaway, and the very first play he has, he gives it straight back to the opposition. Like, that is backbreaking in terms of the momentum swings, and is devastating in that regard. Look, he brought them down the field. He put them in the lead, obviously, or leveled it up, sorry. Obviously, the Falcons were left with enough time, however, to go down and kick the winning field goal. Again, Matt Ryan leaning on Kyle Pitts. I have to call out, because it's National Tight Ends Day, not only Kyle Pitts, but my new favourite man crush, Mike Gesicki, did reach up and steal the soul out of a defensive back by ripping the ball out of the air, out of nowhere, which I particularly enjoyed, it must be said. But the biggest problem for me on this Dolphins team is just they go through these patches. They've now had 5 out of the last 6 games. They've had a period, including this game, where they've conceded 20 points or more without reply. That type of flow, and I mean, because we heard it a little bit, the narrative, you seem to start the first quarter well, you seem to end the fourth quarter well. What happens in the middle almost happened again in this Falcons game. They just have this flow where it just goes to pot. So that's 5 out of the last 6. Now they're going to go to Buffalo, where they've lost the last 6 games against Buffalo. It's not looking good, I would say, in relation to it. It's a bit like, Liverpool going to Man United doesn't look good for Man United in that instance.
I read a good point today. They said they've got a lot of great players, but they don't have too many average players. And what they meant by that was you'll have your Waddles and your tight end, and they've included Tua in the great players. But the problem is the players around they're average, and there's not enough average players to help the team as a core, and that's the reason why they're not winning the games. Strange one.
But look, moving on, there were some other fun games. I mean, look, I won't keep making jokes about Liverpool Man United being over at halftime, but one game in the NFL that was over halftime was the Bears versus the Bucks. I mean, Colin, we could talk about Tom Brady giving his hat to a cancer survivor. We could talk about his 600th TD for the first time in history. But I mean, are there any other storylines around this game that don't involve Tom Brady and how amazing he is?
Very few. The fact that he had done it previously, but obviously there was a lot of talking about Colin Cowherd, who had an issue with QBs wearing their hats backwards and how this is a sign of immaturity. Well, Tom Brady wore his hat backwards both on the sidelines and in the press conference yesterday. And as he threw his 600, 601, 602, look, where do you start with it? The Bucks look phenomenal. Godwin was fantastic yesterday. Mike Evans, they put an absolute beat down on the Bears, who just couldn't get going in any way, shape, or form. And the Bears have all sorts of issues and questions that they need to solve. But just in a year and a half in Tampa, Brady has 61 touchdowns and 15 interceptions.
If the storyline of the game is what way he wore his hat, it's a bit concerning. Justin Fields was obviously, let's just say, he was, once he's out of his depth, that's probably a bit too harsh. He struggled yesterday badly. We touched on the blitz on the show. In terms of him struggling against blitz, I think the second play of the game, he completely got blitzed and hammered to the ground. And 5 interceptions, I think 4 were in the first half. And given Brady, like if you look at Brady's throwing yards yesterday, they weren't over 300, but that's because he had such short fields to work with, because the interceptions just kept on coming. And the Bears I think the Bears now are in a COVID situation. Matt Nagy now this afternoon has been confirmed as COVID, and he may be absent for next weekend's game. Maybe the Bears fans will be all happy with that, and let someone else do the play calling and coaching the team. But I didn't expect it to be as excruciating as it was in terms of the score. It was 25-3 at halftime. You can end 38-3. There's one field goal in the whole second half.
That was in the second half, yeah.
Complete shut off in terms of the game. And there's
and look, Knowles doesn't want us to be too cruel on the Bears, guys. Well, we don't have to be cruel. I think Tony Romo and Jim Nantz were doing enough damage and being mean enough to the Bears yesterday. I mean, it was still the first half. They were 21-0 down. They miss a field goal, and Jim Nantz sarcastically goes, "And here come the Bears." I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, the number one broadcast team, they were being pretty rough, and Nantz was reminiscing on how many touchdowns he's seen Brady score, and it seemed like they would rather be. I mean, it felt like for the second half they were out playing golf, to be honest with you, for most of the game. Tony Romo having a few digs at how important that field goal or passing up a field goal and going for it on 4th and goal was, and things like that. So, look, there's not too much to say. As I said, you call it, Brian, as I said at the top of the show as well, like the defense turned up for Tampa Bay, which was long overdue. But the Bears have issues. Romo and Nantz had fun with it. And Brady, other than Mike Evans trying to give away the ball for his 600th touchdown, had himself certainly a very good day all round. That being said, you mentioned about the COVID situation in Chicago, and breaking news, if anybody hasn't called it earlier on, that seems to be a bit of an NFC North challenge, because the Packers have their own issues. The defensive coordinator has gone onto the COVID list, and only I just saw literally before we came online, Devontae Adams has been put on the COVID reserve list, and the Cards are now 2-5 on for Thursday night football, because if you're going on that list now, guys, you are not playing Thursday night. So the Packers are certainly going to be shorthanded for that game. Colin, they weren't really shorthanded this weekend because Taylor Heineke did silly things like, go down too early and take a Lambeau leap. Green Bay fan taking a Lambeau leap, but he just hadn't scored the touchdown. Slight problem.
Yeah, he had talked all week, I suppose, about his excitement at playing at Lambeau, but I mean, that's the difference. When you get into the NFL, you have to make the most of the opportunities, and in back-to-back plays, he ended up costing them. What was he doing in terms of look, he had a straight run to get in for that touchdown, and he goes down too early. And they made a lot of play on commentary about how, sure, if you go back a number of years, it would be different. But we're talking 5 years since the rule change, and then he doesn't get in. There were other moments where he played well. You know, the fact that he was downfield blocking and able to recover the fumble speaks to his grittiness. But grittiness alone is not going to be enough to be a starting QB in this league. And the Packers, I mean, Rodgers, just some of the things that he does are just kind of so ridiculous, in both in terms of the drama over the summer, but then you see him kind of do the crossbody throw, and he just makes things look so easy. The Packers, I thought, looked, impressive against a Washington front that kind of woke up a little bit. They make life very difficult. We know that they have the talent. The great unanswerable in all of this is, why does it work sometimes and not others? But they certainly made life uncomfortable early on. But ultimately, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers march on. But to lose their DC and to lose Devonta Adams on a short week, yikes.
I think Washington will be slightly disappointed in a way. I never felt they were going to win the game, but they got into the red zone quite a few times. And I know we're talking about that particular touchdown that was ruled out, but there was also the one where he fumbled in the red zone and took forever, seemed to get the decision made by the guys back in New York. So I feel they would have walked away from that game saying, we held them to 24 points in Lambeau, and we had our opportunities in the red zone, and we didn't do enough. So maybe it's a turning point for Washington. We'll say they have the Broncos this weekend, but yeah, this game now on Thursday, which we were all very excited about and looking forward to a good show on Thursday with some good guests coming on. I think we might see the unraveling of the Packers, because I don't think we're at the end of just the defense coordinator and Adams being ruled out. I think there's a few more to come.
The unraveling of the Packers just for today or this week, Brian, or just in general? Is that
it's this Thursday?
Just this Thursday. Okay, fair
enough. In fairness, if all things equal, I'm pretty honest, I find it hard to go against the Packers on Thursday night.
Yeah.
But then look, it's 7-0 against 6-1. It's no one's shocked by who you pick in this game, but obviously with key players like Adams being out and potentially a few more, the game will get away from them.
Well, I was shocked by Michael picking the Jets this weekend, but we'll get to that in due course. When it comes to the Packers, actually, you gave the stat about them being the 7th best defense. I remember, on the Sunday show, and I remember thinking at the time, I was like, I don't get the sense that they're a great defense necessarily. And I know Zadarius Smith is out, or Zacharias Smith is out, so they're missing a little bit of their pass rush there. But I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And then we stopped watching the Washington game, and they called out the stat that they were 15 for 15 touchdowns once a team got into the red zone against them. And I was like, oh, that's why I haven't felt like they've been an elite defense. Of course, then, as you alluded to, Brian, they stopped Washington on 4 red zone tries in a row. So they kind of rectified some of their stats a little bit there. But look, there were lots of really interesting games. One of the games, look, it was pouring down with rain for the Colts versus the 49ers. Maybe they'd imported some of the tears from Manchester after the 5-0 loss of Man United by Liverpool. If you didn't catch the game, guys, it was a bit of a beatdown. But anyway, Colts versus the 49ers. The Colts go marching on, and the 49ers are now on a 4-game losing streak. Colm, what's the story there for both sides in relation to it? Because the storyline keeps evolving through the season.
Yeah, well, the Carson Wentz reclamation project continues apace, because he is on 4 straight games with 2 passing touchdowns and no interceptions. And that's the longest streak. You got to go back to Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers in weeks 1 to 4 last year. So Wentz is playing really well at the moment, and I think took advantage of a 49ers team that are ill-disciplined when it comes to defensive pass interference. You can get them on that. You just air it out and they're going to go at you. The Bucs, I think, are the only team who are in and around them, but the Bucs have played an extra game. And I suppose for the For the Colts, you're looking at the fact that they have really begun to motor. They have Jonathan Taylor, who is an outstanding running back, and they're leaning into him. And they came up once again, Kyle Shanahan, and I know 49ers fans don't like it, but he always wants to be the smartest man in the room. And Darius Leonard said afterwards, about the opening plays where the 49ers were so successful. They did a great job, especially on the first drive, of misdirection runs and putting us in bad positions to make plays. I was glad they kind of went away from that. So once again, Kyle has something that's working, and Kyle wants to, be big brain Kyle, and I can show what I can do. And Jimmy Garoppolo is a problem. But we knew Jimmy Garoppolo was a problem, but Kyle went up in the draft and got a QB who he then doesn't start behind a QB who he doesn't like. I don't know what's going on in San Francisco, but they have got to figure it out and sort it out very quickly.
Yeah, Carl Shanahan's comment at the end when asked about, is Jimmy Garoppolo the star next week? Yeah, I think he would be. Wasn't exactly a resounding vote of confidence.
Well, at least he might be alive, because prior to the start of the season, we didn't know whether Jimmy was going to be alive the day after.
That's true. That's true. Brian, D's comment there, is Robert Saleh a Todd Bowles 2.0? Obviously, that has resonance on the Jets side of the house, but it equally has resonance on the 49ers side of the house. I mean, he's gone. That vaunted front four doesn't look the same. That defense doesn't look the same. Has the impact almost dented the 49ers just as much as it hasn't yet helped the Jets?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I believe so. You saw the last couple of years how clued in the players were and how positive they were around playing with him. And for him to go, and once another defensive coordinator comes in, doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to see the same impact with the defense. And they are struggling that game last night before it kicked off with the rain. I thought it was going to be a low-scoring game. So to just get up this morning, watch the highlights, and see how reasonably high-scoring it was. The 49ers it's a difficult one. Because you look at that game going in last night, and me and Colin were high on the Colts, but I know yourself and Michael picked the 49ers. We felt, having come off a bye, they would be ready to go and get the win. Hasn't played out that way. I think more so around the point on Trey Lance. The reason why Jimmy will be playing next week is because we haven't seen enough of Trey Lance yet for him to make this step up and take over that responsibility. And ultimately, that's why Jimmy G will stay in that position. And just on Salah, then the Jets went in yesterday, and Michael picked them, but you're talking about beatdowns. I don't know what Bill Belichick was purposely wanting to give it to the Jets in particular, because, time and time again, when he plays against them, he has to make a point of putting the extra dagger in the heart. And certainly that was the case. And look, Wilson was gone early with the injury, but the game is over even at that stage. And looks like he's going to be gone for the bounds of 3 to 4 weeks. And some players rocking up with touchdowns that I hadn't heard of before. JJ Taylor, Mark, is that the name?
Yeah, JJ Taylor. We carried a number of running backs. I mean, Sonny Michel was deemed expendable because JJ Taylor has run hard the last couple of off seasons. Rondé Stevenson would have also gotten in there as free agent, an undrafted free agent who was a good option in relation to a backup situation. That's why we felt comfortable about trading away Michel as Patriots team fans looked at it. So yeah, I mean, hey, 54 points to 13, like 41-point beatdown. The only solace I can give the Jets is, of course, the Patriots have beaten them by more. 45-3 stands in the memory banks and everything. So, I mean, that's something to live by. Look, I'm going to enjoy it. And, of course, you do. A divisional game, you're always going to enjoy beating your opposition that badly. But there's not much to say about the game because, as you say, it was a bit of a beatdown. It was over by halftime. Just like another game, it was 4-0 at halftime. But anyway, Colin, we'll move quickly on from the Patriots and the Jets because I don't want to be unfair and rub it into the Jets a bit too far. Well, unless you want to say anything else about that, but I'm wondering, can you be the neutral voice of calm to talk about the Panthers versus the Giants? Because if I talk about it, I'm going to lambast Sam Darnold too much. And if Brian talks about it, it's just going to descend into Giants fandom. So, you be neutrality. You be Switzerland here.
Well, I had taken the Giants because I thought they would get a response, and I don't have any belief in the Panthers. Going back to our preview show, I think Matt Rule generally is a builder, but it generally takes 3 years. And I think Sam Darnold has derailed that. They have a real issue on their hands there because he has regressed. He might be, he as bad as he was in his Jets days. And Peyton Manning made Adam Gase a lot of money. Adam Gase provided a shield for Sam Darnold and may have made Sam Darnold a lot of money because people thought it was all on Adam Gase. And the Panthers, gave up not a first round, but they gave up enough to go and get him. Then they appeared to hesitate and they didn't pick up that 5th-year option initially. And we all wondered, were they going to do something in the draft? Then they did pick it up. And now they are lumbered with Sam Darnold. And what do you do with him? Because it's not working. They brought in the backup and that didn't work either. But like a stat that I saw from Adam Levitan earlier on, which was really interesting. It kind of highlights where the issue with the Panthers. Robbie Anderson has 20 targets over the last 2 weeks. It's resulted in 25 receiving yards. I mean, that has to be some sort of record. You're targeted 20 times and it results in 25 yards. The Panthers have a lot of issues. The Giants still have a lot of issues. I mean, it helps when you're playing the Panthers, but the Giants have moxie, and Joe Judge managed to coax a result out of them. Danny Dimes played very well. In fairness to him, he put the team on his back, which is what you need your QB to do. And if he is to get another season there, that's what we're going to need to see more of. That's where QB makes a difference in that sort of game. And in fairness to the Giants, I just thought that we'll see, but missing a lot of players, and they were able to get it done. But you've got the Chiefs coming up. If there was a time to play the Chiefs, certainly next week is it. Brian, what are your thoughts about your Giants?
See, the problem today is all people say, but it was only the Panthers. So there's no point in me giving it an argument about the fact that the defense played so well. But I was very high on the defense going into the season, and the defense that played yesterday was what I expected. 6 sacks. And Ojulari, our 2nd-round pick, I mean, he's just progressing into a nice player. 2.5 sacks yesterday. Standout player so far on a defense which has been very poor. But we're not going to talk about the trick play, no? I mean, we've seen the trick play.
Oh, the athletic skills from Daniel Jones with the one-handed catch on the kind of special type play.
It actually reminded me, Mark, and I'm not trying to have a go at you, right? And
of Brady not making the catch in the Super Bowl. Yeah. I know exactly where you're going with it.
But I'm going to put that down to age. I'm going to put that one down to age. I mean, Tom is old and he's got all the rings. He's got probably more rings than Mr. T had, at this stage. But, he couldn't reach out. But look, you have to say it was a fantastic catch. And all the stuff coming out today is really enjoyable. And sorry, just on Colin's point, everybody keeps going, Daniel Jones isn't good enough. And people then, you ask them, say, why? Say, interceptions. But if you actually look at the stats throughout the season, he is putting the team on his back. And last week's game, fair enough, he's going up against a difficult opposition in the Rams, who are arguably one of the teams to go to the Super Bowl. So you're right. I think we have a fair crack at this team next week. It reminds me of last year when we went into Seattle and nobody gave us a chance. See, Chiefs are 1-5. 1-5 and they're struggling.
So, Brian, I'll be honest. I'll call it now. I think that's the best game I've ever seen Daniel Jones play. He's probably thrown for more yards. He's thrown for more touchdowns, but it was a complete performance, and he's put a number of them together. And it's not just the catch. It was making the right decisions, being decisive, not making the silly throw, not trying to overthink things. Even, I know it sounds silly, but even sometimes throwing the ball away when he had to. Was a really good performance by him and a deserved win by the Giants. Another team, whoever had a great win at the weekend, don't worry, Brian, I'm not going to say Liverpool, but it was very deserved. Colin called them out at the start of the show. The Raiders, Colin. So you said you were, impressed by them and very impressed by those. I mean, take us through the Raiders versus the Eagles, obviously bringing it home, staying atop of the AFC Best or AFC West, whichever you like to call it.
Well, look, I think the Raiders did a job in terms of cutting out a cancer in Gruden, and Derek Carr is having a season. Now, he needs to continue this, right? We have seen this from Derek Carr before, and sometimes he falls off. But right now, in fairness to Derek Carr, he couldn't have done more yesterday. 31 of 34, 323 yards, 90.9% completion rate. He was fantastic. And if you're talking about, putting teams on your back, like, he has become the face of that franchise, and a franchise, that we all associate with diversity and their long-standing tradition, and then hurt by that. But in fairness to Derek Carr, he's stepped up, he's rallied the team, and yesterday he was really good. Just very quickly on the other quarterback, because Jalen Hurts is going to cop an awful lot of flack, right? But it wasn't just Jalen Hurts, because when he threw his 10th pass of the day, okay, there was about 9 minutes gone in the second quarter, right? And the game was tied at 7-7. He didn't throw another pass until the next quarter, and at that point they trailed 24-7. So it's not just on Jalen Hurts. The Eagles' run defense against a Raiders team that have struggled to run the ball was really not good. Now, interested to see if the Raiders' run gets better, then Derek Carr could get even better. If that was just on the Eagles, then it's going to be a long season for them. So kudos to the Raiders. They sit atop the division right now, and given everything that went on, their fans can enjoy this week.
Absolutely. Josh Jacobs coming back as well and kind of reopening up that run game for the Raiders that was big. We're going to cut to a couple of bits on Twitter actually in a second, but before we do, one last game to touch on. Brian, maybe I'll throw it to you. The reunion klaxon was going off, obviously, in the Lions versus Rams. We said about the reunion klaxon going off for J.J. Watt and DeAndre Hopkins also going back to Houston with the Cards. Obviously, the Cards coming out strong in that game. What were your takeaways from that game?
Look, in fairness to the Texans, we've touched on it throughout the first few weeks of the season. They do play for the coach, but ultimately they're just not a good side. I mean, they played well in the first half. They were 5-0 up on stage, and the Cards never got going. And when they did, the game quickly got away from them. It was a comfortable game in the end. And then Hopkins, Kirk, and then Zach Ertz for a touchdown. I mean, they couldn't live with them. And offensively, they're not a great side. You saw it yesterday with Davis Mills. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy. He's been thrown in at the deep end so early in his career because obviously the injury situation. But you have to wonder, should they consider bringing in another quarterback who has a bit of experience from another team that's playing backup and give them the opportunity to put them in games? Because we're finding once they're in games in the first half, they're quickly blowing out games. And I know with the exception maybe when the Patriots struggled there a few weeks ago, but look, the Cards, it was a weird one in a way because I felt the Cards might be looking ahead towards the game on Thursday night against the Packers, and they may not win as comfortably as they did in the end. But the Cards keep on rolling, and Texans for me was they play for the coach to the poorest team in the league, without a doubt.
Yeah, we didn't unfortunately see the J.J. Watt tight end package, but in random synchronicity, I thought about this the other day. Zach Ertz, who's joined the Cards now, obviously, his wife, Julie Ertz, plays professional women's soccer. Kiali Watt, as her name is now, J.J. Watt's wife, also plays professional women's soccer as well. And I just thought that's a nice connection for them, and it will help J.J. and Zach when they line up in the tight end position, I think, at some point in the season. I'm convinced we're going to see that again. Guys, before we turn our attention to Monday Night Football, I know we put it out there on Twitter earlier on just to get people's views and thoughts on their team thus far. So I'm going to read out a few of these, and if you put them up as well, feel free to read some of the ones that you enjoyed out. But there were some great ones. I want to say, as a bunch, mostly people are depressed, basically. People were more than happy to share how unhappy they were with their teams. There's a few Bengals and Raiders ones we'll get to where they're very happy, but ones that made me laugh. MH said, I'm a Jets fan and obviously made a lot of bad life choices. Also a Man United fan, # Black Sunday. Danny O'Brien said the Steelers offense make a 100-yard field look like 120 yards, but TJ Watt is worth that money already. There's plenty of people hating on the Broncos column, which won't come as a massive surprise. In fact, in one of the best Irish lines ever, Neil Bradshaw, Broncos fan, shite. Long season ahead. It was just brilliant. Mikey, who's a Vikings fan, just said, "It's the hope that kills me."
We all live that world.
Yeah, but like as I've said, never bet on the Vikings. I can't imagine what it's like to support them. Steelers play so hot and cold from JT. Seahawks, and I can't show it, but there's Forky from Toy Story 4 with a meme saying "I'm trash," and he's just put that underneath the name Seahawks, which kind of gives it worry. Jacob thinks there's hope for the Atlanta Falcons, but the defense makes him worried. More Jets fans hating the Jets, more Jets fans on the Jets. Tampa Bay Bucks, nothing to worry about offense. Secondary, however, is a different story, except when they're playing the Chicago Bears. And the Pax fans, great start, huge potential, season definer this Thursday night. I have a feeling he tweeted that before the COVID-19 news started to hit by and everything. But then few Raiders coming in. Owen Farrell, very disappointed with the 49ers. The whole organization is a mess starting with the coaching and player selection. I know injuries have played a part, but it's time to start the future. Start and stick with Trey Lance. The future looks bright, but the season has been a disaster. Owen, pretty strong there, man. Tip the Bengals obviously weighing in with positivity around the Bengals. Cowboys, Fred and the Irish Cowboys starting to think the Cowboys can make a run. There's a few people there. And John Cahill about the Browns. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. More questions than answers. At the end of the day, still happy to be firmly in play for the playoffs. We can't go through them all. There's a good few Dolphins fans having the crack.
Mark, my favorite was simply from Sweet QT, who just said sadness at Washington. I think that sums up the situation with the Washington football team.
I think that's a good one. Absolutely. Brian, any favorites in them, or just? I mean, do we see any Giants ones?
No. They come in DMs to me. I'll just shoot them. No, I think in fairness, I think probably the best one really was Owens from the round. The 49ers, a balanced one. You know, there is some positives at the end of the road, but change is needed. But no, it's great to see all the responses. Great to see all the interaction. You know, that's
absolutely. As we often talk about, look, we're 32 counties in the island of Ireland, but there's 32 teams in the NFL, and all of them are supported. And we appreciate your feedback and inputs in relation to it, guys, because we know you all love the game. Boys, it feels like time. I know we're going to talk about the betting in a little while as well, but it feels like time to turn our attention to not what's gone, but what's to come. And to come tonight, obviously, is our lovely futuristic Monday night football game. With the Seahawks and the Saints. So, Colin, break it down for us. What's going to happen in this game and who's going to win?
Well, it was around this time last year where the Seahawks began to sort out their defensive woes, but at that point they had Russell Wilson, who is magic. They have Geno Smith, who is the he's maybe the Joe Bluth if we're talking about magicians. If Russell Wilson is a magician, he is the Joe Bluth of magicians. Any Arrested Development fans will get that. The Saints have a whole host of players coming back from IR, and they look, I mean, I've said a number of times they're Jekyll and Hyde, and I still think that is the case. If Russell Wilson was playing, you could make a lot more of a case for Seattle, but with him out and with the Saints getting guys back, you would have to think that this should be there for the Saints. They should have enough. But look, we know to expect the unexpected in this game. Could Geno Smith lead the Seahawks? And anything is possible. And we saw, some results yesterday that were, maybe a little bit closer than we anticipated. And this is not going to be a Patriots Jets type of game. But the Saints Sean Payton is a very smart coach, much like Belichick. He manages to get the best out of what he has, and so with them coming back, you'd have to have them, I think, as the heavy favorites for this game.
So you're going Saints, and Ellie Goulding used to sing "Anything Can Happen." And Brian, have you any news from us in relation to anything happening in the NFL?
I do, Mark. I have a big quarterback trade for you just to announce. Just been announced in the last couple of minutes, and I know we're coming up to the deadline next week, and we touched on the show. Tua to the Broncos, potentially Deshaun Watson, maybe going to the Dolphins, and Michael's come back in because he wants to hear the big quarterback news. Well, Joe Flacco has just been traded to the Jets.
Good they got that veteran quarterback there to steady the ship. Michael,
Colin's in disbelief. Yeah, it's just
he's in absolute disbelief. Michael, you were the man in black, and just because before potentially your Wi-Fi goes again, because it looks like you're doing this by candlelight. Let's throw it to you about the Seahawks and Saints and Monday Night Football.
Well, I heard half that sentence for a start. I don't know if you boys can hear me. I mean, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, yeah. Okay, great. Just for anybody watching, I sat for 35 minutes before the show started on the balcony, and the minute the intro hit, sprinklers everywhere, so I had to go. So if I was, very vocal in certain aspects, it is what it is. I'm just devastated. Anyway, Monday Night Football pick, I'm going to go with the Saints. I can't put the graphic up yet because I'm meant to go last, but thank you for that, Mark. And going to go with the Saints. I think Kamara will score 2 or 3 touchdowns. But then again, I picked the Jets yesterday, and I picked the Panthers yesterday. Sorry, bro.
No problem.
Don't worry about that. We all make mistakes, Michael. We all make mistakes in life. Some of us support wrong football teams. It's okay. Brian, what about you on this game tonight?
It's a tricky one because I think, in fairness, we saw a reasonably good performance out of the Seahawks last week. They were 14-0 down in Pittsburgh, and people probably felt that game was done and dusted, and they rallied. And they always tend to put a good performance in for their head coach because, some people love him, some people hate him. I think it's fair to say the players do play for him. But for me, it's the Geno Smith situation. He had a good game when he came in that game against the Rams a few weeks ago. But we find that with backups, they come in during games. Teams haven't schemed for them. They play reasonably well. But when he gets to a stage after a couple of weeks and there's a bit more footage for teams to work on, they don't tend to do very well. So for me, I think the Saints will go in and win and continue this kind of surprise element because a lot of people, including myself, felt they wouldn't be that challenging this year in terms of the division. And they play the Bucs this weekend in New Orleans. So they need this win to be in with a chance of potentially going top of the division.
So you're going Saints as well. I don't know, guys. I know next weekend is Halloween, but it feels like we're bringing in Halloween soon. First of all, there's Joe Flacco news, and all I can hear on that is like, he's back, kind of poltergeisty type of thing. Michael looks like he's filming the Blair Witch Project 3. And then we've got Monday Night Football between Geno smith and Jameis Winston, which could get really, really ugly and scary for anybody who likes actually offensive play. Christ almighty, Colin, you nailed it on the head. I mean, stranger things have happened, but I saw enough for Geno Smith. I'm sure the Jets fans that we were just calling out on Twitter there, giving their feedback, saw more than enough of Geno Smith. And if he is the answer, guys, I don't really want to know what the question is. Jameis Winston's been bad Jameis and good Jameis, all sometimes in the same game with the Saints. But I'm banking much more on Sean Payton and particularly on Alvin Kamara to steady the ship and see the Saints through. And if they win tonight, 4-2, they're in prime position still around the wild card. So, we wouldn't necessarily have envisaged that at the start of the year when we were considering the great Taysom Hill / Jameis Winston debate. So I think it's a full house on the Saints then. Colin, you might remember that Joe Flacco guy. Well, didn't he turn up in the Broncos at some point?
Jets fans have been so long suffering, right? And only the Jets as an organization could look at the Philadelphia roster, right? And what, Zach Wilson is out probably 4 to 6 weeks from what I saw earlier on. I guess they don't want a QB controversy, but why you bring Flacco in? I mean, surely bring Minshew and give yourself something. Joe Flacco is a disaster and has been a disaster ever since winning the Super Bowl. Yes, Baltimore, he gave you some magical moments and the Mile High Miracle and Raheem Moore being falling over and that wonderful playoff run. He has been an unmitigated disaster ever since. He was a nightmare at the Broncos. He was worse again when he went to the Jets. Last year, 55% completion. He's not a leader. He's all about himself. He is there to pick up a paycheck. But unlike Sam Bradford, who at least went about his business without creating a fuss, Joe Flacco is awful. Terrible person, terrible QB, fitting that he ends up with the Jets. I thought the Jets were over making poor decisions. Here we are again.
Joe Flacco owes me a weekend, £1,600 sterling, and a win. I went and seen him against the Bears 2 or 3 years ago. Just disgusting, boys. That's all I'm going to say.
Right. Anyway, I just want to make a quick one because we've been putting up the comments from people, and we got one in there. We didn't get an opportunity to put it up. Aaron, who's actually in Chicago watching the show, and he's a Cards fan, so he must be a very happy man at the moment. There we go. So thanks, Aaron, for your support watching the show from the States. And yes, he is going back. He's going back to the Jets. I assume he's talking about Joe Flacco and not someone in Chicago traveling back home. But Cards fan, so he's very happy, especially now hearing all the news about the Packers players potentially being out on Thursday as well.
And from anyone being cynical as to, well, Aaron supporting the Cards in Chicago because it's better than supporting the Chicago Bears, bear in mind, of course, the Arizona Cardinals originated from the Chicago Cardinals. So they actually were a franchise that originated in the Windy City there. So thanks for joining us tonight. Michael, you've settled down now. I think it's less Blair Witch. It's a little bit more Halloween now with the bright light.
I'm really annoyed. I probably could have stood out here the whole time like this, but I didn't know I was going to get soaked. If it helps anybody, all my clothes are soaked now. Just very quickly, I don't know if I missed it or not because it took me 20 or 30 minutes to get on here. Have we talked about Justin Fields? Have we mentioned about Justin Fields yesterday? Are we all going to talk about it? Okay.
I commented on the fact that he threw 5 interceptions and he struggled yesterday. Ooh. And I said, I'm not sure if the game was too soon for him, but he had a very difficult day. The offensive line, in fairness, didn't help him out either, in fairness.
Mm. We were nice, Michael. I mean, Bears fans have suffered enough. It's like I was even nice to Jets fans tonight. There's a time for healing, and there's a time you don't want to be reminded of devastating losses where a game's already over by halftime, where key players are removed in the second half.
Does he realize I have the button? I can take him off.
Where
stop talking.
Question the existence of the management. That type of thing. You don't want to be reminded of it. I get it. We won't bring it up. It's fine.
We were nicer than I was on the WhatsApp group last night when I saw Tom Brady getting someone to do his dirty work for him and go off and get the ball back. Give me a break. The guy's got all these rings, numerous footballs, hats wearing backwards, and you go and get me that football. Go get it yourself.
It was the middle of a game, Brian. I think he's got other things to worry about than getting the football. And the Bucs probably will display that in some respect. It's not necessarily for Brady. I mean, if Mike Evans hadn't given it away, we wouldn't be there. Before we get moving, Brian, the betting lines with Matchbook Betting Exchange, our great sponsors.
For this evening's game, I think the Saints are floating around minus 5.5 points on the game. So the expectation is to win by a touchdown. It'll be a close enough game, and they'll win by, touchdown. It's a tricky one. As I said, I think Seattle will hang around, but I feel that Saints will just win. I think the bookies have called it right. It's a tight game.
Right, and there's just flashed up a reminder in relation to the welcome offer that you can still get with Matchbook if you use your bonus code Irish NFL Show, which is a welcome offer in pounds or in euros. Please read all the terms and conditions carefully and gamble aware. Please bet responsibly. Michael, as you're out there in the dark, lurking, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, they all spring to mind. But have you anything before we get into Halloween week and the bearings to send us home safely, hopefully?
I'll just obviously next time I go away, I'm going to get somewhere with decent Wi-Fi, and I'm looking forward to Thursday night. I can't wait to see how we're all going to sit for an hour and preview Thursday night football because it seems as if it's going to be very interesting after the last couple of hours.
Michael, by the time you get back in the country, Brian will have erected a life-size statue of Daniel Jones making the one-handed catch in his garden. It's already on order and anatomically correct in every which way.
Hang on. I'll
Lads.
get a better one for you. There we are. Look at that,
Brian,
baby.
I'm delighted, man. I'm buzzing. As I said the other day, the more teams that win for my team, the better.
Well, we've got
hope
two
the Giants
first rounders
win on
next year,
Monday
so I hope Noel's still not on the show because if the Bears continue to lose, we'll be all happy. There's another nice one for you. The Statue of Liberty's getting replaced.
God, how a day, boys, can change New York sports, eh? Can't wait to see next
it's
Tuesday morning,
unbelievable
Sabres.
today.
Well, I mean,
Look, come here.
If Brian gets the life-size statue of him
Fair
doing
play
that
to him.
one-handed
Fair play
catch,
to him.
I'll get the life-size statue of Daniel Jones falling over after running down the field with no one's tackling. You know, just as a degree of equilibrium to the whole match.
He felt sorry for Wayne Gallman on that particular drive because he scored on the next play, but let's not worry about that.
Love it.
You'll be all cheering for the Giants come next Monday. Well, with the exception of you, Mark. But those two boys in that division will be cheering for the Giants when we go into Arrowhead.
Well, look,
football. And it's on at 12 o'clock because of the time difference next week. Happy days.
Much kinder. Lots to look forward to on Thursday night show. Lots to look forward to on next Sunday show. And lots to look forward to next Monday night. Thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. It's been a lot of fun. And Michael, enjoy the rest of your time in Portugal. We look forward to having you back with us for Thursday evening, live in HD. And talk to everyone then.
obrigado.